My name is Vicki Kelchner, and I am an assistant. No, I'm not an assistant anymore. Just kidding. Associate professor at the University of Central Florida. And I'm really excited to be with you all today. If we could start, just so I kind of know my audience today, if you wouldn't mind just maybe introducing yourself and say where you're from, that would be awesome.
Michael Brady from Florida Atlantic University.
Hi, Michael. I think I know you. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Jamie. Oops.
It's okay.
Hi, I'm Jamie Jocelyn from University of South Florida, the Eileen Hafer Hoffman You Matter program.
Super.
And Margot Izzo from the Ohio State University, retired faculty, professor emeritus.
Great.
Crystal Sutherland from FIU Embrace, Florida International University.
Stephanie Harris, vocational rehabilitation.
I'm Katie Norland. I am at the College of the Florida Keys in Key West, Florida.
Katie, can you tell me one more time where you're from? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The College of the Florida Keys, we have Project Access. We're in Key West, Florida.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, everybody's jealous of you.
And sometimes it's really rainy today, so nobody feel bad that you're not here.
Well, thank you for trying to make me feel better. Appreciate
I'm here
it.
for you.
Anybody else who just popped on, if you don't mind just saying your name and where you're from.
And we have Philny Llewellyn, who's from who is a graduate social work intern at SEU.
Oh, super. Great.
And Linda from Gainesville, Project Saint.
Super. Oh, great. Yeah, because you're moderating the chat. Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. And, I just kind of, my presentation sort of goes over, and I don't know where your programs are. So I don't know if you're at the beginning stage, middle, if you've been around for a while. So bear with me, and we can diverge off into any topic you want to. But I'll go through the slides. Stop me at any point. I'm very flexible with that. I love audience interaction, so I might ask you questions too, and like I said, ask me questions anytime. So I will start. So I started off by just kind of telling you the first steps that we kind of went through with building a program, looking to see what credential we wanted to have, how we'd go about doing that. So where do you begin? So really looking at the industry trends in the US and then tearing that down some. So you start really broad, then looking at trends in Florida, and then looking at trends in Central Florida, because that applies to me because I'm at UCF. Then also looking at types of companies, what ones are expected to grow, what are the annual growth rates, because all this is giving you data that kind of helps you create the credentials, name those credentials, so that our students, obviously, our goal is for them to be employable. So also looked at best cities for future job growth, highest projected growth rates in Orlando, North Point, and Jacksonville, and Ocala were some of the areas that I focused on simply because I'm at UCF. So what I found is the top industries really were healthcare, skills trade, technology, sales, construction, education. And then I wanted to look at where there's shortages, because that means there's more employers looking for employees. And those shortages were really in healthcare, technology, skilled trades, bus drivers, housekeepers, customer service professionals. So then I wanted to see what was needed around our area and the areas I mentioned, and then what does UCF, really where are our expertise, where are our specialty areas? Because if students are coming to us, we want to match those two things. So at UCF, we have specialty areas in hospitality, communication, social services, education, technology, healthcare, human services. Now we have specialty areas in a lot of other things, but these really kind of matched up with those growing job areas that I just mentioned before, and then matched up with our students and their interest. So then when we looked at those two things, we thought, okay, well, we need to see what classes we even offer that apply to these areas. So these were just a list of the classes within those areas that we thought would be good for our students. So I listed those out. We started researching those, started connecting with faculty, seeing, you know, if it would make sense for our students to be in those classes, how they could be supported, if they'd be successful, and then if it played into the whole bigger picture of the credential. Any questions so far? No. Okay, good. Or it's not, it's good if you have questions too. So then we canvassed IES students, families, interested students, and said, hey, what are you interested in? Because there's no reason to develop a credential that students aren't going to come to be a part of, that they're not interested in, you know, that they don't want to further their education in those areas. So what students said were hospitality, education, social work, social services, communication, interdisciplinary studies, computers, videography, and photography. So luckily, everything started lining up. So their interests were within those fields that there's needed, within those fields that are around us, and within the area of UCF that have those specialties. So why, you know, why is a name important? So I'd like you guys to give me some answers to that. Why is it important? What does it matter, the name of your program? Or program, but your credential, not your program. I'm sorry. You all have fantastic names for your programs, by the way. I love Embrace. I love all those names. So, but why is the credential name important? And I can't see the chat. So if you're silent, which I'm good with silence because I'm a counselor.
Well, I would think that the purpose of the name of a credential to an employer would say, okay, I know that this candidate has experience already in this area. So if they have credentialing in like Microsoft Office, then I know as an employer that, okay, they can do Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and the basics.
Absolutely. Very valid point.
And Debbie commented that it reflects what's in the industry.
Exactly. Great. Any other ideas?
I think some language also comes with positive and negative baggage. I mean, you can win, get an easy foot in the door with some terminology, and you can get the door closed on your fingers pretty quickly with other terminology.
That's a great point. Also, if you have a name that's misleading, and then our students are put in those environments and it really doesn't fit what the name of the credential is, then we're going to get doors shut, right? Then we're going to break off partnerships, internship sites, anything, organizations, because they're going to say, oh, well, they have this credential, but they don't know what they're doing, right? They don't have the skill set that goes along with this name. Great points. Anything else? So all the things that you said, the name is important. It's important for all the reasons that you listed. It's also important because our students have so many choices now, whereas years ago, they didn't have these post-secondary choices. So we want students to go into programs with credentials that they're interested in. So if you have a name of a credential and the student's looking through different brochures or trying to figure out where they want to go to school, then they see, oh, well, this credential is really something that I think I'm interested in. Let me look a little further into it, because we want them to be matched with universities and colleges that are going to be a good fit for them. So for me, it's super exciting that they have all these options, where in the past, there were not a lot of options. So we want them to be marketable when they finish their program. We want them to have the skill set that is inferred by the name of the credential. So that way they're going out there and they're doing the work that the credential says that they can do. So all those things are really important. Okay, so I just did this little diagram showing you, we looked at the job markets, the specialties, the interest, and then we came up with professional services credential. And then within that credential, students are able to pick 3 different concentrations. So they have hospitality, early childhood, and then social services. So you can see, you look at the data, you collect it, you align it with the university, you align it with the student interests, and then you create a name. And then we felt like that name kind of encompassed all those 3 tracks, but then they're able to even dial it down more to specifically what they're interested in within that overarching professional services credential. Okay, so the fun's not over yet. So from there, you go into plan a study, course sequencing, develop core courses. And then after that, like you haven't already had enough fun doing all the syllabi and all this good stuff, then you go to the college level, you have to get approval there. And I'm sorry if this is, you all already know this, I apologize. Some people might not know it. And then after that point, you go, you seek university approval. Then you launch your courses, and then you seek state approval. So lots of fun steps. So this is just an example of our course sequencing with IES at UCF. So you can see we have these core courses where they take, everyone in the program takes certain courses that we thought were beneficial for everyone. And then within their course sequencing, they go into those specialized areas. And it's a total of 42 units that they take. Okay. Then the core courses that we felt like really aligned with the skills that they need to have for moving on to employability, you know, really being ready for that job market. Strategies for student success, career planning 1, 2, and 3. Oh, I put 1, 2, and 2. That's great. It's supposed to be 3. Personal leadership, intro to communication. And then we have internship ×5. So we really want to scaffold their development with an internship. So they have a co-curricular internship, they have a work internship, and then they have their big capstone internship. So we wanted to make sure that we chunked it, scaffolded it so that they were prepared for that big capstone internship, which hopefully leads into employment. We felt like it was really important to structure that so that they were supported and to help their development along the way. So within this, you really want to look at what are the targeted learning outcomes? You know, what do we need to know that they're learning, and how do we go about making sure they're learning these things? What are the skills that students need for that employment? Because that's the ultimate goal. What's the purpose of the course? I mean, we can have these great courses, but if we don't even know the purpose behind it, then it doesn't really make sense. So we aligned all the course objectives with NACE, the key attributes for employability. So within each syllabi or a syllabus, we have week 1, and then you can see the topics, what they're going to be reading, what assignments are due, what the objective is, and then how it aligns with those standards. So for each course, this is how it was developed. Okay, so this is just kind of an example. Hold on, I need to move my little toolbar because I can't see the top. Oops, sorry. There we go. So you have your topics, assignments due for those topics, again, the course objectives, and then those standards. So throughout each week. Well, I kind of already ran over the steps towards approval. I just really wanted to use this approve and reject button. I'll just be honest, because I thought they were kind of fun. But you have the college level curriculum committee, the university level, and then state approval. So what are student learning outcomes? You can read my definition, but I'd love to have it in your own words. Like, what does this mean to you all?
What do you want the student to do that he or she doesn't currently do?
Exactly. And those learning outcomes really need to be aligned with what's the goal, right? What's the ultimate goal? And you have small goals and then big goals. I know when you all put in for your applications and then you put in about your program, you have those short-term goals, you have the long-term goals. I mean, all of those should really kind of reflect what your learning outcomes are, and those should feed into that. You all can read this definition. I'm not going to read it to you, but that was just one I found that I thought was pretty all-encompassing. So then you have to say, how are you going to assess the student learning outcomes? You know, I think sometimes with programs, you'll have these great objectives, these great goals, but then where the ball's kind of dropped is there's no really solid way of making sure and assessing that those outcomes are met. So here's just a kind of an example of how you can look at that in assessments that are aligned with those things. So personal leadership, career one, so these courses, how are we going to assess it? So these are just some examples. And you want to make sure those learning objectives line up with what the courses and the assessments are going to accurately judge if they've met those learning outcomes, and then just kind of a description. And aside from the ways that I showed you, what are some ways that you all assess student learning outcomes? Because I'm interested to know. I know what some of you do because I do work with the center, but I'm just wondering, you know, what are other ways that you can assess aside from just the assessments that I listed? What are other ways to see that students are actually learning what we intend for them to learn and what they need to learn to be employable?
We have our students complete an on-campus internship in their second semester. So we have the opportunity to kind of, you know, hands-on work with them to see what they learned in the fall, what they're learning in their current courses. And that's kind of our opportunity to say, okay, these students are or are not employable, and then kind of make the changes based on, you know, internship supervisor feedback, career internship coordinator feedback, program coordinator feedback, things like that.
And the feedback that you get, is there a structure to that feedback? Is it interviewing, or do you use like a structured type survey? And anybody can chime in.
In our case, we're super small, so it's mostly anecdotal. We do try to utilize our standard intern feedback form, because that's what we use to assess all of our students' skills in their internships, and our students in Project Access are no different.
Okay, great. Anybody else use some of the same things we've been speaking about, or do you have a structured format? You know, it's always
yeah.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Margo.
Vicki. At Ohio State, we've developed task analysis list of all of the duties and tasks for a job. And we take data on whether the student has achieved it or not achieved it. And once they've been proficient at a skill for like a predetermined amount of time, you know, 3 to 5 days, then we'll mark that skill as proficient and we might move on to other skills. But then we go back and check on those skills, because if they don't continue to do the task, sometimes they'll forget. So we try to generalize those skills from, you know, one setting to another setting to make sure that they're proficient in 2 to 3 settings before we go to an employer and say they can do this skill. So we use a data system, and it's a checklist where every time the student is on that job site and performs that skill, we check whether they've done it independently, if they've needed a prompt, or whether they've needed a verbal prompt or a physical prompt or an auditory prompt.
And is there an observer that's sitting there with the form watching them?
It's the job coach,
the job coach
who hangs back as much as possible, doesn't talk, tries to be as unintrusive as possible, but is taking data and will only, only engages with the intern as needed to provide the prompts.
So I think that's really great. And I like that you mentioned, you really want to make sure that they can transfer the skill sets from one environment to another. Because we know with our students, they might really nail it in one setting, but then when you go to a different setting, transferring that knowledge, those skills over can be pretty problematic. So making sure that they're in different environments and they're still successfully, executing all the skills is really important. The other good thing, Margo, I like about that is if you're collecting that data, you could do it pre, mid, post, whatever, within the semester, within however you want to structure it. And then I'm assuming that you all really want sustainability within your programs. Well, when you're collecting that kind of data and you're holding it and you're looking at success, the significance of change, that can help you for applying for grants to fund your program. So it's important to be thinking along, those lines too, because you want to make sure that these programs last that for a long time. So any kind of data you can show to prove this is evidence that this program significantly impacts the population that we work with and it leads to employability is really important. And sometimes when we start programs, we don't think like that, but it's good to think like that in the beginning. So you go ahead and you have a structure of being able to assess and then have proof of what we're doing is working. So great. Okay.
I have one other idea. This is Debbie Reed, and I'm sorry, I can't get my camera on. I'm in my car, so you don't want to see my car.
Well, we're glad you're here, Debbie.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, we don't have an official program yet. We're working on that, but I would think that maybe something toward the end, like focus groups.
Absolutely.
And yeah, for the different, for the students, maybe some focus group work with faculty, all of those. But I think that might, get some different kind of data toward the end of the program.
And I think that's important. If you can kind of have a trifecta of data that proves that students are successful, that's important. And you could have the focus group. That's a great idea. You also could have simple like Qualtrics links that you send to parents and gather data survey wise too. I mean, you want to look at like all the whole community, the whole system. So anything you can pull in is important. The other thing too is when you're re-upping, if you're looking for like the continuation grant, you're applying for those things, you need to take what you're doing to assess learning outcomes, program success, and be able to align that with your objectives, your goals, and how you're proving what you're doing with your program is important. And that it's working. So that way you're successful with getting more funding, even through the center. And the center looks for that. So if you're starting out and you're creating it this way, that the continuation grant application, all of those things will be much easier to be able to provide that evidence or show how you're going to provide it in the future.
And Vicki, Debbie just commented an additional comment and said, thanks for the reminder about including the parents in this survey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. Okay. So when we're looking at SAPs, the Satisfactory Academic Progress, what does that look like? That could look like percentages of attendance. You might have, when you do your write-up about the program, we want to have 80% attendance success, right? So that's one way. Cumulative grade point average might be another. Our target is that 75% of our students will have whatever your grade point average scale might be. We'll have 3.2 or better. Satisfactory course completion. Okay, maybe you're going to look at it that way. Well, we want to have at least 95% of the courses completed with satisfaction, right? That might be one way. Pass rate, 70% of all credit hours attempted. Then you can use the assessments, the NACE employer attributes. You could say, okay, on our assessments, they showed this much progress, compared to pre, mid, and post. That's another way of looking at SAP. What are other ways that you guys have used? I'm just throwing some out there for you. You might be doing some of these, or you might have really awesome ideas that we haven't thought of. Is anybody doing anything different? Maybe not, or am I giving you too much? You're like, what?
Now, one thing that we're using at UMatter is we use Nearpod a lot when we do workshops with our students because it's user friendly for them and it's a great way to collect data either through polling or open-ended questions or quizzes. And it's also, it works on their technology skills, which is extremely valuable.
I'm writing this down. That's a great idea.
And Linda Musillo indicated that they use a rubric.
Great. Yeah. Using a rubric's great because then you can check off, okay, they meant this, 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 and this. Super. Anything else? Okay. If things pop in your brain, just send them out. Okay. So I kind of talked about this a little bit. Well, why is this important? Why are all these things important? I'm sure that we're all in this field for a reason. We probably have really big hearts and we want to have inclusion just like a standard, right? Across the universe. And so we have really good ideas and we come up with programs that are great, but you know, it's important to really justify what we're doing and showing that we are seeing success. So aligning those expected learning outcomes is really important. And having, you know, the satisfactory academic progress standards met, that's important too, because that's giving people proof that it is working. And that way we know it's working. You know, we can work all day, and if we don't really know what we're doing is leading to successful employment outcomes, we're just hoping, or we might have a feeling, but when you're able to align and prove it, then you know. And this all equates to creating a meaningful program of study that contains employment-related credentials and leads to employment for our students. Okay, so some of just like the next steps that you might want to be thinking about that you might already be doing, but is a program evaluation tools. Like you're looking at your students, you're looking at your student success, academic success, but how do you look at your whole program and make sure that they're meeting the needs and everything that you're doing within your program is leading to success? You know, and how do you evaluate programs effectiveness? Do you all have any ideas?
One of the most important large outcome measures is employment. And so employment, yes, no, the average wage, the average number of hours per week, and the longevity of that employment. And we've had our advisory committee member from DSACO, our Down Syndrome Association, comment that she didn't feel our wages were high enough given that students were going to a post-secondary program. So she was like, well, great, you've got 80% of your students employed, but they've paid for your program for 2 years and their wage rates aren't significantly higher. And so she really challenged us a couple of years ago to really work at trying to get our wage rates up higher, which takes being able to demonstrate to employers that these students already have these skills and you're not going to have to train them, and the quality of that job match. And so that's one way to evaluate a program, but that's kind of a large picture. There's lots of other steps closer to the fact, like even matching students to internships and using the data collected on that daily or intermittent basis to demonstrate that they have the skills. That's another evaluation tool.
Absolutely. I hadn't even thought about, I mean, maybe I thought about it a little bit, but I'm glad that you brought up the comment that the parent made about the wages. And then it is important to look at employability, and then not just when they graduate, but that I think the long term is important. So if we have some way to follow that, and I know sometimes it's difficult because students move or you lose contact with them, but if you can follow that, say year 1, year 3, year 4, year 5, whatever you choose, and you can say, look, not only did they graduate, but they're staying employed for this many years. I think you could also look at even like life satisfaction scales for our students. Like, what does that look like? That might be a way to also gauge, well, not only are they employed, but their life feels like it's fulfilling to them. You know, there's an array of things that you can do. But for the purposes of our program, the employability piece is huge because that's what you're funded to do, right? Is to create a program that leads to employability post-graduation. Any other ideas? And again, you don't want to leave the parents out either. I think sometimes what happens, or probably more often than not, is when our students graduate, they go back home. So their parents, you know, are with them all the time. So accessing their knowledge too about what's going on, I think, can be really important. And then the employers too.
A great suggestion that came out of the FIU team, and I want to thank Crystal Sunderland, who's also on this, and she could probably speak better to this, but
Super.
They evaluate independent living skills, and they're trying to assure that students become proficient at laundry and budgeting and the social skills needed to go out and purchase a meal or a snack within budget. And they brainstormed that for students who aren't in the dorms during their person-centered planning meetings, they will give that task analysis of how to do laundry to the family and say, we want your son or daughter doing their own laundry at home. And so here's a task analysis, you know, let's adapt it. They obviously don't have to put money in the machine, but here is, you know, something you can use, and helping families then support the development of those independent living skills and employability skills.
Yeah, that's super.
I'm jumping in even though I'm co-hosting, but another thing to consider might be how many jobs, if you're looking at them longitudinally, how many jobs have they had in the last 6 months, the last year, and why did they leave those jobs? And Linda again commented, their students have a monthly checklist to self-assess their goals in all areas.
Oh, that's great. And, you know, not only like how many jobs they have and then why did they leave, but I think also looking at that they have the skill set to be able to find a new job. Like that's important too, being able to find employment, engaging, well, you know what, I'm working here, but it's really not suiting me. So I'm going to advocate for myself and I'm going to look for another job and then move to that job. I think that's really important to look at as well. Anything else?
And Linda does have the checklist, and she has included her email address in the chat for those who would like to access that checklist.
Super. I would love to see the checklist. I'll have to go to the chat and get your email after I'm done. So, okay, great.
And she's emailing, oh, someone's emailing Linda, so.
Good. That's another thing too, is that we've all done a lot of work within our programs. Why not share it? Like if we have things that are working, let's share it and adapt it to meet you know, the needs of our university or colleges. Because if you're doing it and you're doing it well, I think there's no reason to share. I'm not stingy. You know, so yeah, if I can help you all with anything, please let me know too. I'll be glad to share what we've done. Okay. And then my next slide really is, you know, it's a little harder doing it virtually because I love good dialogue. But my next slide is really the last one, just about questions. Anything at all you can think of. I had a great discussion, a very quick discussion, but a great discussion with Crystal and the FIU team about how to build those internships. Like, what does that look like to build more sites, to, you know, create those partnerships? Any questions at all? Let's talk about it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you are looking at, we have our first cohort right now, so we are just a few months in.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. It's very exciting. And when you're looking at developing credential programs on your site, what do you feel was the biggest challenge?
For me personally, I think one of the biggest challenges was to reach out to faculty that didn't know much about our population and educate them, and then to get buy-in from each department on the courses.
Okay.
And then sometimes that can be problematic because you work with certain professors. And in our university, a lot of the department chairs were honest. They were like, you don't want to do this in this section with this professor, and I appreciate them being transparent. So I think that was a challenge, but just finding the courses that really did best meet the needs of our students, finding those professors and instructors that understood our population. And we still have kinks sometimes. I mean, Andrew can attest that we've had a faculty or two that we've had to kind of go a little bit head to head, but it was okay. It worked out. Andrew was like, I need you, Vicki, I need you. I said, okay. So you are going to have those challenges. One thing that we have talked a lot about and we have done is go into those department meetings and explain to them about our population. So really working with them to understand. So if you go in and if you find buy-in by just like one or two professors, then, and if they have a louder voice, that helps because then it spreads across the department. So finding the little golden nuggets of people that support our students and then have them be a voice is really important.
Margot has included a link, and hopefully you'll explain what the link is for, Margot.
Sure, I will. Thanks, Susan. There has been a lot of work done on transition from high school to college and careers. And I posted the link to the National Technical Assistance Center, which is transitiontechnicalassistance.org. And there are a lot of great tools that can be used both for program delivery and evaluation. And so I posted a link to one page, but secondary transition doesn't differ a ton to what post-secondary transition to college and careers needs to be, or post-second college to careers. And so there's a lot of things that have already been created. And so everything from lesson plans to evaluation toolkits to transition assessment tools. And so I just wanted, again, Vicki, I appreciate you saying, let's not recreate the wheel. There's a lot of resources available both within the Florida network as well as this transition TA and at Think College.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margo.
Yes. Yes.
Great.
Vicki, I have another question.
Sure.
Would you include a survey of changed attitudes of college university staff in a program success evaluation?
I would include that because we really are trying to make systemic change, right? We're really trying to change everyone. And so I think that's important. And that's a good idea. I'm writing that one down too.
Susan, both Ohio State and Vanderbilt has done a study of changes in attitudes of peers without disabilities towards students with ID. And there's several articles that have been published on that. I'm not sure I would hold a program responsible for changes in attitudes, but I think involving typical peers in our programs helps to prepare a future workforce that will be peers for our students. And if we can get typical peers over the stigma of, oh, they have a disability, I don't understand what they say, and look beyond to developing a relationship, learning how to communicate, learning to understand maybe some of the speech impediments that some of our students have, that can help build the natural supports that will be in the workforce of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. And maybe even the changing the attitudes of faculty is not what one of your outcomes, right? But it could be supportive of this program is also doing this. But I know in certain programs, including IS, we partner them up with kind of mentors that are neurotypical grad students, or undergrad students. So the students, they mentor, they help them transition, learn things, and they become their friends. So that changes the attitude, right, of I think a whole campus. Then their friends see that they're friends with the IS students. I mean, all that really can be pretty impactful. And then usually we'll do workshops too for those students that are paired with our IES students. So in one of the workshops that I do for IES is we talk about mental health wellness. We talk about boundary setting. What is it going to look like to work with your partner? What are the things, if people ask you, like, why can't I understand them? This is how you can address that. So really training them to be advocates for our students, I think, is very important. I mean, the boundary setting can kind of be difficult sometimes. So helping them kind of walk through that or role play that out can be helpful, particularly if they're new to being a mentor. And I don't remember what we call them. So it probably isn't mentor, or it might be, I'm not sure. But those things are important. Another thing that I don't want to neglect to talk about, just because it's very important to me, is that we've created a mental health model to support our IES students at UCF. So our IES students at UCF are able to access counseling services. So it might be individual counseling services. We also provide family counseling services for the IES student and their families. And then we run all kind of groups. So each year we sit down and look at the needs of the IES students, like where do we see some deficits? Is it in social roommate situations, or is there a deficit in, one year we ran sexuality groups because they were confused and they were curious. So we ran a support group, processing group, psycho-ed group. So whatever our IES students, where their needs are, we provide supports in a group format, individual counseling, family counseling, which I think is important because historically this population is neglected when it comes to mental health. And they have a lot of mental health challenges, just like we all do. And when you take someone moving from home into and transitioning into college, it doesn't matter to me who that student is, there's challenges. And there's even more challenges for our students just because they don't have quite the same problem solving skill sets as some other maybe college students coming onto campus do. So I think that's another way of really providing that support in hopes of success, right? And not just success at UCF, but we're talking about like life success. And the parents, the families, often they need support too, because they're just like, what do I do?
So I have
another
question regarding your core, the core courses the students take throughout the program. Are those inclusive? Does a faculty professor teach them, or is it somebody on the IES team?
So it's been a little bit of both, but right now it's somebody on the IES team. And then we, when needed, we'll do consultation with the faculty. It's usually me. But yes.
Okay.
That's a good question.
I have a question about your observation of employment trends. I really dug your first 4 or 5 slides where you're looking at national and then regional trends in employment, and then moving to questions about what certificates, what credentials are needed for those. We're finding lots of employment, lots of jobs in the community that don't require credentials at all. And then there are certain credentials that are generic enough to, the fact that somebody knows that the student has been learning how to go to work is enough, so it's like an entry level work credential. Are you seeing credentials as well that, I don't mean credentials as much, are you seeing employment trends as well that look like they might be bigger payoffs than others, and others that are, oh my God, that sounded like such a good idea, but we've never been successful getting somebody hired in that area. What are some of the pros and cons that you're seeing with job trends, employment trends, nationally or regionally?
With credentials?
Or with just employment trends, and then if that leads to credentialing, cool. That gives us all a path. But even some that don't lead to credentials.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So if in the whenever the students are employed after, like what are we seeing, or just in general in jobs in organizations, what they're wanting?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at more of a large brainstorming level of. I'm curious to know what you're seeing in terms of, employment trends have changed so much since COVID. We now see unemployment rising for odd reasons, like people don't want to work. We see certain types of industry positions are harder than hell to get. I mean, the food service industry, who would guess that there would be massive shortages?
Right.
Truck drivers, things like that. Are you seeing shortages that we didn't see before that might be higher impact than we used to think of them as being high impact?
I think those are really good questions, and I don't really have an answer. I feel like for us, I still feel like we're newly into COVID.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing. So I don't really know, but I think it's a really great conversation, and it's something we should be thinking about, because I don't know what's gonna happen with the future and employability. So far, I mean, internship sites and stuff have been fine, but I don't know long term what that's going to look like. Now, we have had dialogue in the past, like, well, what does it really matter if they have a credential or not? Like, how do you sell that to parents? And I think the way that you sell that is you talk about, but they learn these skills, and hopefully these skills can be transferred in all kinds of facets in their life, right? And that if you have two people that are going for the same position, if you have somebody who has had these experiences and has this credential compared to somebody who doesn't, hopefully that would give them kind of the leg up.
Yeah.
In that employer deciding to hire them. But those conversations are not new conversations. Now, how is COVID impacting things? I'm not sure. Now, I can tell you how it's impacting mental health. And it's a struggle for a lot of people. I'm seeing things in the mental health area that I have not seen before. So I know that piece, but that's definitely something I think we should look into.
Linda commented that they're seeing a lot of hospitality openings. And in regards to their previous conversation, we had a comment that agreeing with more information or support for social emotional needs. And they have added social work interns to help address the needs with their students in addition to the University Counseling Center. Super. And that's from Christy, I'm not sure.
Which, I'm curious, which college or university is that from?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's Southeastern University, sorry.
Okay. Southeastern?
Yes.
Vicki, I can jump in a little bit to try to help.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, how are you?
I'm like, why did you come listen to me speak? You know all this. Thanks for the support.
Be supportive of the great work that Vicki has done, because she's on the faculty side and we're more student affairs side. So it's been really, really great partnership. And I believe I overheard Margot talking a little bit earlier too, but Margot was in those planning sessions with us a few years ago.
Yes, I was like, Margot, hi.
But Michael, I can talk a little bit about what Linda mentioned as well. We are seeing just with our location in Orlando, we have a lot of students that are really, really interested in the hospitality field. And with that professional services credential and the internship that they complete, that really opens up the door to a lot of hospitality areas. Previously, we've had, I think, 4 to 6 guys that all have went up to Cedar Point up in Ohio and worked there part-time. And then when they close for the October, November months, they come back down here and work at Universal, Disney, the Fun Spot, and all these other tourist attractions, which the credential, I think, really, really benefits them and the experience that they've had. It opens up the door for a lot.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep, thank you.
I was going to mention one other thing too. This is not really aligned with what you all are talking about now, but I don't want to forget. One thing that we had the IES program kind of housed outside of a college for a long time, but then we moved it into the college that I'm in. And I think that was a really strategic move, because when you can have buy-in from a whole college, then the word spreads even more. So when the college is aware and you have all these many, many departments within a college, then that just increases the odds of success and just the awareness, and then people being open to different ideas. So that's one thing I did want to mention, because I don't know really with other colleges and universities how you structure it. I know that some are housed within colleges and some aren't, but I know from our experience, moving it into a college was a really good, like, strategic move. Anything else? We're having too much fun. And I will put my contact information in the chat along with my cell phone. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I'm really interested in connecting with the Southeastern, because you're the first, I always canvas when I go and talk about the program credentialing stuff. I always canvas people and say, hey, how are you meeting mental health needs? And I've never found any program that's doing it the way that we're doing it or doing it at all. So that makes me excited. If you all ever wanted to chat about how to create a mental health model for your programs, how to connect with counselor ed or social work, whatever you have at your universities and colleges, I would be more than happy to discuss that, because we worked diligently to really look at that, and we have tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. And so this is the going on seventh year that we have had the mental health component model in place. And it changes with the needs of the students, but I'd be interested to speak with you all about that.
I put my email in the chat.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll put my information too. Okay, and there's my information. Anything else, you guys? I keep on saying anything else. I'm like, what else? This is good conversation. I love it when people that are all over doing great work like you all are doing, we can come together and discuss what we're doing, what's working, and how to just create more and more programs for our population to succeed, and all that good stuff. So. We have 3 minutes, so you guys, you probably want to break. I know that it's intense work that you all do.
I do want to say, I think it would be interesting, and I think I saw Claudia on this, to have further conversations about how to support the mental health of students in our program, especially, I mean, you guys are massive schools. I'm a tiny little state college in Key West. So, how can we utilize resources? How can we bring that mental health support onto our campus when we don't have those resources? So I think it may be interesting to even further have this conversation in June, because there's such a focus on mental health right now.
And that's something, so Janice and I have been talking about that. I'm like, okay, Janice, come on, let's start sharing the model, because I just think it's really important. So Claudia, I'm sorry, I kind of, she was directing that towards you and I jumped in.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But I think that's great. And I think it is kind of just like a next step of what we've been doing, right? Is looking at, okay, what are the other supports we need for our students? So I think that's a really good idea. One thing just off the top of my head is that you might, even though, and I don't know where you're located or what's around you, but sometimes even if you're a smaller institute, there might be bigger or satellite campuses around you that have counseling programs. And within our counseling programs, we always have to have internships, we always have to have practicum, we always have to run groups. So you could bring in students from another surrounding university that could come in and run some of these groups, because they have to do it for their degree. So then they would be free. And then the students who are running them get experience, right, working with our population. So then they're equipped when they go out and work at agencies or do private work or whatever to work with our population. So far at UCF, I have trained over 150 mental health, marriage and family and school counselors to work with our population. And 9 times out of 10, when I canvass them at the end and say, you know, what's your feedback? They always say, this was probably one of the most impactful pieces of the program, was learning to work with this population, because they're scared. They, you know, because a lot of them don't have experience and they're worried that they can't do it. And then they do it and they have success and they're like, this is awesome, I want to do it more. So what it's created for me is the students that have been trained are now out in different communities, and I use them as referrals. So when I have families, you know, approaching me, or colleagues, or I'll have pediatricians that will reach out to me and say, hey, you know, I have this student that they're neurodiverse. You know, these are some of the things, these might be their diagnoses. Who can they go to for mental health support? And now I'm able to say, well, let me pull out my list. These people will be good, which is great, because that has not always been the case. So it's kind of, you know, it's multiple tiered. You're supporting your students, you're training future clinicians to work with our students and families. To me, that's a super big win